Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Deep and Effective Big Book Study. I am your host, a recovered alcoholic, and this is going to be episode 7, Bill's Story. And I've decided that since, trying to keep these videos bite-sized, the 30-minute range, I'm going to break Bill's story down into 2 parts, right? Bill's story is 16 pages long, and so a good splitting point would be on page 8, and this is actually where Bill Wilson's first 7 pages are Bill Wilson being sick, and then from 8 on is basically where he's entering into this phase of being recovered. So I think that's a good place to split the story. And we'll go ahead and get opened up with the set-aside prayer. So if you care to join me, that'd be great. And we'll take a quick moment of silence and invite God into this thing. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, the 12 steps, and especially you, so I may have an open mind and new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth. Okay, right on. So we've started off correctly. So like as always, this is a deep and effective big book study. We're going to go to page 25 and read a couple paragraphs. I read this in every episode, and it's just such a great example of hope, and it's been my experience too. So, middle of 25, the great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. Oh, that's so powerful. All right, my friends, if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, like, and share. Leave me a comment. As always, I'm going to drop in my email, which is recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. And if you're looking for big book sponsorship, men and women, reach out to me, please. Guys, I can take care of you. Ladies, I can get you hooked up with some women in the program that are very strong. I talk about meetings that I attend. I attend 2 regular meetings a week. One is a all-men's meeting, meets Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central, and here is the Zoom code and password. Also on Sundays, it's a men and women's meeting. We meet at 6 p.m. Central as well, and I'm dropping in the Zoom code and password for that meeting as well. So we got all the pleasantries out of the way, and let's just get right down to business, guys. So we're going to do Bill's story, like I said, and one of the first things that we could ask ourselves is, why is the first chapter, why is it the first thing we come to when we're getting in the book besides the doctor's opinion? Why is it Bill's story? Well, there's a couple reasons why Bill's story is first. Number one is because Bill Wilson was so grandiose and his ego was so big that he wanted his to be the first story you came to. And we're going to get into some of this about Bill. And I'm here to tell you, if you do a little research and start learning some history about this guy and finding out what he was all about, Bill Wilson was an absolute egomaniac. He was just so full of himself. And you're going to see this in his story. Another reason that Bill's story is in the first of the book is it's for the reader to identify with. And let's forget that Bill Wilson is a middle-aged white guy from the East Coast that earned his living as a stockbroker. Let's just forget all about that stuff for a minute. All that stuff is irrelevant. What we're going to really be looking for in Bill Wilson's story, what I need to be looking for to identify with, is what's going on internally with Bill, right? Because we're going to see the first 8 pages of the book of where the progression of the disease takes him literally to his knees, and we want to see where his selfishness and his self-centeredness and his ego and all of these things that that make up the alcoholic, we see where these are the things that are actually what's defeating him. And so we're going to take a little deeper look, and perhaps in a way that most people haven't seen before. Because I had a man show me Bill's story in a way several years ago that completely changed the way I read everything. And, that first main paragraph, he said, "I discovered liquor. I forgot the strong warnings and the prejudices of my people concerning drink. Well, that's what the first 8 pages of his story are going to be about him, how he's discovered liquor and just completely forgets about the warnings, you know. And then on the last page, last paragraph, again, he says, the ominous warning which I failed to heed. And it's this doggerel that he reads here, right, that he quotes. And I'm going to read this last paragraph, and let's look for some Bill and self. Look for some ego in Bill already. He says, 22 and a veteran of foreign wars, I went home at last. He says, I fancied myself, for I had not the men of my battery given me special token of appreciation. My talent for leadership, I imagine, would place me at the head of vast enterprises, which I would manage with the utmost assurance. See all those I's and those me's? That's all ego. That's all that pride. That's all that grandiosity. And boy, can I relate to that. And when we get into page 2, right, this is where we start learning a little history about, you know, him becoming interested in the stock market and all these things. And again, there's so much ego and so much grandiosity in that. And Bill Wilson was a very greedy man as well. The second main paragraph, it says, by the time I had completed the course, I knew that the law was not for me. The inviting maelstrom of Wall Street had me in his grip. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. So money was his hero. Money was the driving force in Bill Wilson's life. His pride and his financial clout is all he ever wanted to be known. You know, it's funny because, you know, Bill Wilson basically just wanted to be a rock star of the finance industry, right? And he wanted to be rich and famous. And the irony of it is he's become more famous than he could have ever imagined because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Didn't come rich from it, but he became extremely famous. So from page 2 all the way to about the half of page 3, we're seeing where Bill is having some success, where things are going his way. You know, liquor is working for him, and life is not that bad yet. But I'm going to pick up on the middle of page 3, and we're going to see some very important changes within the story. He says, for the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. See, that's that grandiosity, that's that ego. Here he is. My judgment and ideas were followed by the tune of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Here's a very important sentence, because he says, drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life. See, right now, as well in my life, see, alcohol worked for me very well for a very long time. Alcohol at one time was important and exhilarating, and it worked. But as we get later into this chapter, you're going to see where Bill Wilson is not describing his life as important or exhilarating anymore. He's going to be talking about in a completely different way about what alcohol is to him. I'll keep reading. There was loud talk in the jazz places uptown. Everyone spent in thousands and chattered in millions. Scoffers would scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends. And here's this next paragraph I really like. Because now he's starting to, a little chink in the armor here, guys. Start things a little change here. My drinking assumed much serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. The remorses of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. There were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. That's an important sentence. Does everybody know what sumptuous means? Because again, I had no clue what that meant when I came in Alcoholics Anonymous, but because I have my little handy dandy dictionary, I'm going to look up the word sumptuous. And when I learn the definition of this word and then put the definition into this sentence, it's going to take on a different meaning. So this is what sumptuous means. Luxurious, extremely costly, rich, and magnificent. So listen to what Bill's telling us. He said there were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous. So Bill's talking about he's got all the money in the world. He's got all the glitz and the glam, and he's got all the external crap, right? But it ain't making him happy, is it? And not about you, but I tried to buy happiness my whole life, and it didn't work. So Bill is telling us in this sentence right here that money ain't what's going to fix us. So we keep going on the bottom of the page here. Here's a very important sentence. He says, liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter Hagen. I began to be jittery in the morning. See how things are starting to take a turn? We're going to be moving out of important and exhilarating here real soon. And on page 4, we keep going into Bill's ego and Bill's self-determination and, the grandiosity and the selfishness that he possesses. So I'm going to pick up on the bottom of page 4, and we're going to go into page 5 and about half of 6, and we're going to do a little exercise. I hope you join in with me. So what you're going to need is a pen or a highlighter for your book, because what we want to do is every time we see the word me, my, I, or anytime Bill Wilson is talking in first person about himself, I want you to circle or highlight or whatever you need to do to bring it off the page so your eye can capture it. And we're gonna do something with this exercise here. So I'm gonna read. We went to live with my wife's parents. I found a job, then lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver. Mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years, or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work in a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. And a little side note of history, this was Macy's. Lois went to work at Macy's. And how selfish of that is Bill, is it not? He's staying home drunk while the wife's out being the breadwinner. Top of 5. I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Oh, Bill, but what happened to important and exhilarating? Well, that's my life too. See, now it's no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. Things have taken a dark turn for old Billy. I'll keep going. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3 got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. Did you hear what he just said? On the bottom of 4, he just told us that he's too drunk to work, so Lois is out earning the money, right? But when he would put a few dollars together, what did he do with it? He didn't take the money home to the family to take care of responsibilities. He paid his bills so he could keep drinking, so he could keep feeding self. And that is just so selfish, and my God, can I relate to that? I'll keep going. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. A tumbler full of gin, followed by half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. See, this is all about that self-will, that willpower. Gradually, things got worse. Life got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were the low point of 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Right? He didn't say anything, again, he didn't say a word about going home and taking care of Lois and the family structure, right? The business in the house. He's talking about that grandiosity, thinking that I'm going to go throw my money around and show everybody how important I am. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. And if you don't know what the word prodigious means, I looked it up one day myself. It just means mighty. It's huge. It goes on a huge bender. Boy, I can relate to that. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. And why is it that the real alcoholic can't take even one drink? Well, because of the phenomenon of craving. 1 turns to 2, 2 turns to 3, and so on and so on. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. Starting to see a pattern here, guys. All of these me, myself. We're getting into where we're going to come to the conclusion that self-will is absolutely no avail. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. And the reason it hadn't come to mind is because what we learn on the top of page 23, when they tell us that therefore the main problem of the alcoholic sinner is his mind rather than his body, the reason that Bill Wilson keeps doing what he's doing is because he's insane. And see, that's the thing about the disease of alcoholism. It's a form of insanity. And is this what I'm supposed to be relating to as a reader? This is why Bill's stories in the front is for us to identify. Does my life look like this? Again, forget about middle-aged white guy from the East Coast who's a stockbroker. Is this what I'm identifying with Bill? I'll keep going. He says, was I crazy? There's a question mark right there. And the answer is yes. And so was I. I begin to wonder for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Wow. If that is not, that's that insanity, repeating the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Still thinking that I am going to fix a problem with the very mind that's creating it. Let's go over to 6. Some time passed and confidence began to replace my cocksureness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes! Exclamation point. One day I walked in the cafe to telephone a friend. In no time I was beating on the bar asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then, and I did. Okay, so we just read a ton of information right here, guys. And if you go back and count up every time you've circled or highlighted or whatever you did, you're going to get about 40 examples, okay? Why is this important? Why did we do this? Because we have to understand that Bill Wilson's story separates into 2 parts from page 8. Page 8 is the pivotal point of Bill's story. And that's where Bill Wilson has his first step experience. And we need to understand that everything leading up to that paragraph on page 8 is what caused him to have his first step experience, right? Because the first 7 pages are about him trying to beat his problem with self-will and his pride and his ego. And what he's coming to understand, what he's coming to believe is that he can't do it. And what we're seeing is this journey into the progression of hopelessness, into this world of self-pity and dishonesty, and all how this just compounds upon itself. And am I relating to that? Right? I've said this before, and I'll say it again, is that, you know, for years I thought the program was for alcoholics. And it kind of is. But the reality of it is, it's actually for the hopeless alcoholic. See, because it's only a hopeless alcoholic that's going to be willing to follow these directions. You know, it talks about later in the book that an alcoholic has to be pretty badly mangled before he really commences to solve his problem. And this is what I'm talking about. I had to be hopeless. Bill Wilson had to be hopeless. Dr. Bob had to be hopeless. All of the early members, the authors of this book, they had to be hopeless, right? Because no one's looking for hope if I don't think I'm hopeless. No one's looking for power if I don't think I'm powerless. I'll keep reading. So we're still on 6. It says, the remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle wasn't there. Can anybody relate to that? I can just, thousands of instances I woke up feeling just like that and going, my God, how did I do this again? I've lost another job. I've lost another relationship. The consequences just keep piling up in my life. Page 6 and 7 are all about hopelessness and self-pity. And I'm going to read a few things. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. That's fear and hopelessness right there. He said, a morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That's hopeless. That's self-pity. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Jim would fix that. 2 bottles and oblivion. Hopeless. So the mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony for 2 more years. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. See, that's dishonest. That's selfish. See some more hopelessness on this page. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. See, that's self-pity. And so he's consumed with self-pity and hopelessness at this point. And that's exactly what I was when I walked in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Completely consumed with that. Then he says that then came the night where the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window and sash and all. Again, hopeless. Let's jump over to page 7. All right, now he's, we're so out of important exhilarating, aren't we? Right? The party's over for old Bill, just like it was for me. You know, that liquor truly ceased to be a luxury. It was totally a necessity. So now he's getting into the rounds of sanitariums. Now he's getting into the doctors. Now he's starting to get medicated. Now they're trying to fix old Bill, right? So on 7, and now the doctor, you know, is administering heavy sedatives, which soon, you know, Bill says, this combination soon landed me on the rocks, you know, drinking gin and sedative, right? People feared for my sanity, so did I. See, hopeless. I could eat little or nothing when drinking. I was 40 pounds underweight. Bill Wilson has gone to crap, hasn't he, guys? A little more down on 7. This is where he is going to start talking about silkworm. He says, I met a kind of doctor who explained that certainly selfish and foolish. So how many examples have we seen already of the selfishness that he possesses? And this is what Silkworth is telling him. Selfish and foolish. I had been seriously ill, bodily and mentally. Well, this is the disease of alcoholism, right? It's the 2-part disease. And I know people out there are going to want to argue with me about the 3-part, and I'm not, and I see your point, and I understand, and believe me, there's many other things that I like to argue about, but this ain't one of them. The book is very clear. It's a 2-part disease. The spiritual malady is not limited to the alcoholic. It's actually the human experience. So what I have is the physical and the mental. That's the 2 parts of the disease. It relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened. So this is what what we've read up to this point. Is everything, all those circles, all the I's, the me's, that's about the will being amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. This is a beautiful sentence right here. My incredible behavior in the face of desperate desire to stop was explained. Right? I have to ask myself, do I truly have the desperate desire to stop? Because I'm going to need it. But that's not enough, because Bill Wilson's about to tell us what self-knowledge will do. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. So on a little side note here, right? Bill talks about, you know, 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. You know, he's just not drinking. And this is kind of what happens to a lot of us in the rooms is that, you know, we come into AA, and just by not drinking, I'm going to start feeling better, start looking better. I start getting a little money in my pocket. I start to get the wife off my back. My job starts to get going better. Any legal problems I have are starting to get squared away. You know, I come in and the fellowship is wonderful and people invite me in and love me and they care for me. And I start learning about the disease and everything's just going good, right? But here's what happens to the real alcoholic. Is I'll start to forget. And what I'll start to tell myself is, you know what? Maybe I've been making too big a deal about all this. I'm good now. I just needed to take a break and reset and kind of get my life back in order, but everything's okay now. And all I've been doing is just drinking and going to meetings. I'm not really doing anything for the spiritual malady. I'm not treating my disease. So what happens after a few months, and we see it every day in the rooms, is we forget. And we start to think that we don't need this thing anymore. And we watch them disappear one by one by one. Right? You with me? You know exactly. You've seen this. Well, this is what's happening. This is what Bill's explaining. Right? Because I'm just not drinking is not going to treat my disease. Just not drinking is not going to fix the problem. I'll keep reading. But it was not. Oh, he says, surely this was the answer, self-knowledge, right? But surely it is not. For the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. Again, hopeless. He's talking about death. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during DTs, where I would develop a wet brain perhaps in the year. So how much more hopeless can you get? Listen to what she says here. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. That is either death or a cage. Cage or a coffin is the end result of this disease. And this is what Bill Wilson is explaining, where he's going to end up. And he is without power to stop it. It can't be more hopeless than this right now. It says, they did not tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. Hopeless self-pity. And I'm going to read this last paragraph on page 8, guys. Because the next paragraph where it says no words can tell, this is where Bill Wilson has his first step experience. And this is where we're going to pick up on part 2. Because this is from page 8 on, is where we leave sick Bill and get into recovered Bill. So I'm going to finish up on 8, the top. It says, I, who thought so well of myself and my abilities, my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Do you see how he's starting to see that he's beaten? Alcoholism is going to kill him, and he's starting to see it. Now I was the plunge in the dark, joining the endless procession of sots who'd gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all, but I would not give to make amends, but that was over now. So this is why I want to split it up in 2 parts, right? We're around the 25-minute mark here, guys. So we want to understand that the first part of Bill Wilson's story is about this progression into the hopelessness of alcoholism. And all these many examples. There's, like, the reason we circled and highlight, like I said, there's 40 examples of him trying to bombard his problem with self-will, right? Can you relate to that? Can you relate to trying to fix everything yourself and to no avail? Do you find it impossible? Well, I do, right? That's when I read Bill's story, I'm just like, that's me, that's me, that's me. This is what we want to establish. We want to establish the hopelessness of alcoholism. We're going to establish that it's only through a spiritual experience that we can recover from alcoholism. So that's going to wrap it up for part 1 of Bill's story. I'm going to drop in my email again, recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. By all means, questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out, ask me anything you like. Always going to offer my hand in sponsorship. If you haven't already had an opportunity, hit that subscribe button. It will really help out the channel and help with YouTube's algorithm. And from bottom of page 164, may God bless you and keep you until then.